finally got a look at the Prime Minister's many financial interests that he kept carefully hidden throughout the election and about which he told numerous falsehoods during that same campaign. And so these are what the revelations tell us. One, that Mr. Carney was not upfront or honest with Canadians during the election. He made numerous false statements he would have known were false when he made them. Two, there is a cornucopia of conflicts of interest in these investments, like we have never seen before from a Canadian Prime Minister. Let me go through and document all of these claims one by one. First of all, during the election campaign, Mr. Carney said, and I quote, "I own nothing but cash and personal real estate, and that's not going to change in public life." Well, it turns out while he said that, he knowingly owned 574 stocks and deferred profits and stock options in Brookfield and other companies. So it was patently and now provably false for him to say he owned nothing but cash and real estate. Two, my assets are now in a blind trust, so I don't know what exactly is in there. That too is false. He must have known what was in that blind trust because he was the one that filled out the paperwork for the Ethics Commissioner to report those holdings. So he knew exactly what was in his blind trust, and he just did not want Canadians to know before they went to the polls. Finally, he said, and I quote, "I do not have a connection with Brookfield Asset Management." Well, it turns out that he has continuing stock options and deferred share units in Brookfield Asset Management. And these options cannot be sold, or at least not easily, and we have no reason to believe they have been. So when he said that he had no connection to Brookfield, he was stating a patent falsehood. Now, why should we care? Why should Canadians care about this? Well, Mr. Carney has shown in the past his willingness to use his political connections in order to profit himself. For example, he said, let me see here, he gave public endorsement of Westinghouse in the leaders' debate. Westinghouse is a nuclear energy company which Brookfield is invested in. He has announced he's going to spend billions of dollars on modular homes. Brookfield is invested in modular homes. He says he wants to subsidize heat pumps. Brookfield is invested in heat pumps. He says that jet fuel, in the past he has said that he helped influence regulatory changes forcing aviation companies to buy certain kinds of jet fuel that one of his companies was invested in, so that air passengers have to pay more for their airline ticket to subsidize this specialty jet fuel that profits a company in which Mr. Carney had a financial interest. And the list of potential conflicts goes on and on. How can he possibly be involved in developing a budget when all the tax policies could impact on his investments directly or indirectly? How could he address things like competition policy when his companies might be impacted? Then there's, for example, the digital services tax. The digital services tax is paid by some of the companies that he is invested in, and therefore he has a potential or perceived conflict of interest in that as well. So Conservatives are calling for two things today. One, we call on the Prime Minister to come before you and explain the contradiction. How is it that he was telling Canadians that he only had real estate and cash when he knowingly had stock options and other deferred benefits? How is it that he claimed he didn't know what was in his blind trust when we now learn that he knew exactly what was in that trust? And how is it that he said that he had no financial interest in Brookfield when he knew exactly that he had stock options and deferred share units? Finally, so we want him to explain why he told Canadians the opposite of the truth during the election campaign. Second, we're calling on the Prime Minister to sell his investments, turn them into cash, hand them to a trustee who can invest them in a way that is completely blind to him, so that he does not have any knowledge of what he owns. That is the spirit of a blind trust. A blind trust is meant to be something that the owner does not know anything about. That's what it means to be blind of the assets. But right now, Mr. Carney is clearly not blind of what he holds, because even we know what he holds due to this disclosure. And this will put him in an impossible position where he will be conflicted at every turn. So either he will have to get up 3 or 4 times every cabinet meeting to avoid stumbling over the 100 plus potential conflicts that the ethics commissioner has identified, or he will act in the cabinet to potentially favor his own interests. Neither of those possibilities is acceptable. And so, again, we call for him to explain the falsehoods, sell his holdings, end the conflicts, work for Canadians. We need a prime minister whose only purpose is serving the Canadian people, to reverse the massive damage Liberals have done, to reverse the out-of-control immigration, inflation, crime, debt, and our spiraling economy. And here we are, a prime minister who's going to be constantly distracted by his private interests when the public interest is in such desperate need of attention. Look at how bad things are in Canada today, and getting worse. The debt is growing faster under Mark Carney than it was under Justin Trudeau. Mr. Carney is spending more in his first budget bill, for his first financial bill, spending more than Justin Trudeau was spending. The deficit looks like it could be even bigger under Carney than it was under Trudeau. We have rising unemployment, a crisis of jobs for our young people. Housing is still unaffordable, and Mr. Carney has so far kept the unsustainable immigration numbers that Justin Trudeau left behind, numbers that are overwhelming housing, healthcare, and jobs, that are dividing our country and breaking up any notion of integration. We need a prime minister who's fully focused on undoing the damage that the Liberals have done, not continuing that damage and focusing on his private interests. Conservatives stand ready to help. We will propose amendments to the ethics law that will make these changes that I have just called for, make them law rather than just good practice. We want this to be once again a country where the leaders work for the people, where hard work pays off, where government is on the side of everyday people who work hard, pay their taxes, and play by the rules.
You know what? I'd like to congratulate the Conservative Party of Canada for finally getting on these issues.
90 days late.
90 days. It would have been real good if we could have focused on these issues during the election period, because it was on April 17th, during the English leaders debate, that Mark Carney divulged his interest in Westinghouse. He didn't do it elaborately or with any kind of
He said it as a throwaway comment. He just said, yeah.
Oh, it was such a moment, and he immediately deflected, and this is how I knew that he had misspoken in that moment.
Right.
So as soon as he said Westinghouse and then quickly pivoted off to another topic, I went, what does he have? What kind of business interest does he have in Westinghouse? And this is how I unpicked this, Canada. I Googled Westinghouse Brookfield, and boop, up comes from the Cameco website on November 7th, 2023. P.S. Who was in charge of Brookfield on November 7th, 2023? Any guesses? Any guesses? It's Mark Carney. That's right. Cameco announced the closing of an acquisition with Westinghouse in partnership with Brookfield. Cameco beneficially owns a 49% interest in Westinghouse, and Brookfield beneficially owns a 51% interest.
Controlling interest.
Controlling, that's exactly right. Brookfield owns a controlling interest in Westinghouse. Now, Westinghouse might be a name that most people are familiar with from back in the day. They used to make, that's right, they used to make household appliances. Yeah. No more, you guys, no more, Canada. Westinghouse is in the nuclear business, okay? They build all of the components that go to building small nuclear reactors. This is especially pertinent for Saskatchewan because our Crown Corporation, Sask Power, is very, very interested in net zero. One of my buddies likes to say that Sask Power, the tail is wagging the dog at Sask Power. Okay, so there's a bunch of people at Sask Power who are doing some really, really dirty work on behalf of the Liberal Party of Canada and their net zero targets. And Cameco is a mining company with major interests in the Athabasca Basin and our uranium deposits. So we have Brookfield, now an American company, Cameco, an American company, and Mark Carney at the top of Brookfield, who are exploiting Saskatchewan's natural resources and running down the nuclear chain when all of this technology is untested. Okay, there are no small nuclear reactors that work in the world. It's completely untested, and they're shoveling these ideas into Southeast Saskatchewan. We unpick this here for you first on Rebel News, on the live stream, Canada. And it's thank you for showing up, Conservative Party of Canada. Thank you. Thank you for bringing this to the country's attention. It is so important.
Yeah, no, 90 days too late when it could have made a difference. Like when Mark Carney was telling us who he was the whole way
The whole
through.
time.
Every time he mentioned an idea, all you had to do was say, how is this idea linked to the Brookfield Brookfield octopus?
That's
like
right.
how? And that's all they had to do. And nobody did it. Like if he mentioned modular housing, yep. How is Brookfield
Modular housing, Brookfield, and it pops up, the end. Like it's all there. Everything he said was a breadcrumb to lead us to the truth. And we were trying to ring a bell on it with this Westinghouse /uranium /Cameco /Brookfield story. And it's great to see the Conservatives and Canada finally waking up to this. There's another part of this story that's intrinsically interesting. So Cameco is partnering with Saskatchewan First Nations to explore and develop our uranium resources in northern Saskatchewan. We have one of the world's largest uranium deposits in the Athabasca Basin in Saskatchewan, and we have to start asking a bunch of very serious questions about how and why the Liberal government is exploiting our natural resources for their benefit, while also working with Brookfield and Westinghouse, two American companies. Why are we doing this? Why does that benefit the people of Saskatchewan? I would argue not.
It benefits Mark Carney's investments.
That's right.
We have the clip of him mentioning Westinghouse, and every time Mark Carney mentions a company or an idea, Google that plus Brookfield. Just do that, and you'll get a hit every single time. It's like during the election campaign when all these LGBT plus activist groups came out and made a statement about the Conservatives. I went to the Open Canada website and searched their grants. Because none of them do this stuff for free.
Right.
Okay, we've got this. Westinghouse was pushed by Carney, owned by Brookfield. This is it during the debate. He did it in front of all of us, just like a serial killer sending letters to the police.
We have big nuclear companies, including Westinghouse, Candu, and others. We have...
Yeah, so that's it. He said it right there. Like when any company they mention, just go and Google it simultaneously with Brookfield.
He divulged it. He was at the top of Brookfield when they acquired Westinghouse with Cameco. He was at the top of Brookfield.
That's why Westinghouse was on the top of his mind. He knows about it.
That's exactly right. And we have to ask the question, how are his clean energy and green initiatives all linked together on this? Because if the federal government is sending money, to the First Nations of Saskatchewan to partner with these companies, well, then that cuts out the people of Saskatchewan. How exactly are we benefiting from this? How exactly are we benefiting from this? And you can't tell me that this isn't a clever ploy to placate the people of Southeast Saskatchewan who have made their living on coal and oil and gas for the last 150 years, and how this is going to push them out of the market, because it is. This is what's in the pipeline for the good people of Southeast Saskatchewan, and I would urge them great caution and to ask a bunch of really hard questions right now.